Hello guys, welcome back to the next tutorial. In this one we're going to talk about the data type called list and we'll see how we work with them. So let me just quickly bring up the PyCharm and let's do things in action instead of just talking. So list is a data type that we can use to store more than one value in one variable name. So basically till now you have seen something like this: x equals to 10. It's one value in one variable, right? But now we'll be storing more than one value, so like 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever, in just one variable name. So it's like a collection of different pieces of information, right? And we store them under a single variable name. So let's see how we define a list. So I'm just gonna say cars, give a name called cars equals, and list is defined as I've mentioned in the comment as well, that they're defined in brackets and each value should be separated by commas, right? So let's define a list. Maybe let's give it a name called let's define BMW, one car, comma, and Honda. Let's do this, right? So Honda, and let's add one more. So let's put Audi, right? So we have three cars and we just defined a list. So if I print cars, I can just do that. Let me just run it, and it prints out the list, right? BMW, Audi, Honda. So we have that. So this is how we define list, guys. Just remember, each element is separated by comma and the list is surrounded by the brackets. And we can have an empty list as well. So I'm just gonna type something called empty list, just a name, and we can have an empty list just with the brackets. So if I print something like this, empty list, let's see what happens. So it's just gonna print the brackets, nothing else. So it's an empty list. We can add things later to a list and we can do all those things. So what are lists, right? We already talked about it, and let's see how we can access the elements inside a list. So you guys, we already talked about strings. String is similar to list in a way that string is a collection of characters, right? So let's say I have a string called test, right? This is what? This is a collection of characters, separate characters, T-E-S-T. They all combine and they are all known as, combinedly they're known as string, right? Similarly, a list is a collection of different values, right? It's exactly the same. So the way we have operations inside strings, we have operations and actions inside list as well. We can access things inside a list using index and all those things, right? So let's try to see how we can access the individual items inside a list using the indexes. And indices are again defined, and they start with 0 and not 1 as they do with strings. So what we can do is, let's do something. Let's print cars, right? And let's access the first one. So cars 0 is gonna be the first index. So I'm gonna access BMW. Let's print it out. So let's actually copy it on the top and let's print the cars later. And you know what, let's print some more thing here so we know what we are doing. So star hash and maybe 20. So what I'm doing is I'm just multiplying this thing with 20s and I'm printing this thing, so it's gonna be printing 20 times the star hash. So let's run the code. So this is just a separator, right? So the first item is BMW. So we were able to access car 0, right? Let's access the first item, sorry, the second item by index 1, and we can access Honda. So this is how we access items inside a list using the index, right? And we can access any item. So that's pretty handy, right? That's pretty good. So let's define one more list, maybe maybe num list. Let's say something like this, and let's do that. So 1, 2, and 3. So what we can do is we can actually do stuff like this. We can have x, or maybe just call sum of numbers, sum num, and we can say something like this, num list, and we can access the item at 0 index, and then we can access the item at first index, or maybe, yeah, let's second or first index, and we're gonna add it, right? So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna print the sum num, right? Sum underscore num. So that's what we are doing. So let's run the code and let's see what happens. So right now the item at index 0 is 1 and item at index 1 is 2. So we added them up in the variable and assigned the value to the variable called sum num, and we printed sum num and it turned out to be 3, right? So we can access items inside a list using the index numbers, right? That's pretty cool. So what else? So I just wanted to keep it to the list definition right now. Don't want to cover any list methods in this tutorial. We'll have a separate one for that. But let's take a look at another thing. So the way we define the list, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna change something. So I'm just again gonna create this list and give it a different name, cars, or maybe I'm gonna say more cars, something like that. So right now what I'm doing is I'm printing more cars and index 0 or maybe 1. So what it's gonna print Honda, right? So let's run it. So it prints Honda up there. So what I can do is if I can assign values to the item in the index. So how I can do that is, let's say I have more cars and I define some, I put a bracket up there and say index 1 and I assign a value. So let's say I assign Benz, Mercedes-Benz. So what I can do is I can assign values to the indexes of the list as well. So I can put any index and I can assign a value. So if I do that and let's print the same line again, let's see what's there on the first index. So if I run again, it's Benz. So right now it's not Honda, right? So let's print the whole list. So more cars, and if I print the whole list, it says BMW, Benz, Audi. So Honda is replaced, right? So what I did is I assigned the index 1 item of the list to the value called Benz. So the Benz, what it did is it changed the previous value and it replaced Honda with the new value. So that's what we can do, guys. That's how we can play with the indices of the list, and it's pretty cool, right? It's pretty cool. So I would just suggest you guys to have this code, download it, and practice a bit on playing with the indices of the list and all those things, and stay tuned for the next lectures. Thanks for attending this one, guys.